Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first updates are coming from Kozachi Laheri area. Today the Russian sources published a very interesting article about the situation in this area, and the Russians reported that as a result of special operation that Ukrainians implemented a few days ago, the Ukrainians managed to capture a few footholds in that area, and the most important, as a result of that operation, the Ukrainians managed to establish control over this area, over the territory with the big buildings, high-rising buildings. And currently the Ukrainians have their main position in this area, which they use for controlling the situation on the south, and basically from this territory the Ukrainians have established visible control over the Russian positions on the south of the Kozachi Laheri settlement. The Russians reported that currently it is very difficult to counterattack and to storm this area, and the main reason of that is, of course, the high-rising buildings in the southern part of that part of the settlement, of the western part of Kozachi Laheri settlement. The Ukrainians continue using the river and the islands between the banks of the Dnieper River to supply and support their forces on this bridgehead. The Russians from their side tried to use artillery systems to attack the Ukrainian positions and not to allow them to send reinforcements and reserves in this direction. The Ukrainians also used this high-rising building area for controlling Russian artillery, and as soon as they see and discover Russian artillery system, the Ukrainians on the other side of the Dnieper River start attack the Russian artillery positions on the south. As you can see, the situation is not very good for the Russians. Currently they need, before they are able to clear this territory, they need to destroy and completely reduce to ruins this western part of Kozachi Laheri, and this is exactly what the Russians are trying to implement. Another thing, that Ukrainians have not just one foothold in this area, they also have another foothold a little bit to the west of that area, which they also try to develop, the Ukrainians. So we'll follow the situation, but for now there are at least few confirmations that Ukrainians still located in this side, on this side of Kozachi, of Dnieper River, and have control over the western part of that settlement. Furthermore, a few days in a row the Russians were publishing videos from Kozachi Laheri reporting that this settlement is under complete Russian control, but the main videos, geolocated videos, was made in the central part, in the eastern part, and probably in the southern part, and the Russians haven't provided even a single video confirmation that they control the western part of that settlement. So we'll follow the situation. Now we're moving further to the Orekhov bridgehead. Today we got a lot of very interesting updates from this territory. Currently we have a lot of different updates completely opposite to each other. For example, some Russian sources reported that the video that was spreading in the internet about the artillery strikes in the central part of Robotyne, which most of the bloggers discovered as the video of Ukrainian progress in that settlement, the source reported that that video is 2 weeks age, so it's like a very old video, and that's usually it's not the first case when the Ukrainians were able to enter the settlement. And basically, according to the Russian sources, that situation took place 2 weeks ago, but after that the Russians counterattacked and forced the Ukrainians to step back. So this is something like a point of view. Of course, we will consider this as some kind of fact, but without more proofs we are not going to update the map, because according to the geolocated videos we have, the Russians were forced to step back from the northern and from the central part of Robotyne. Currently the Russians, according to information we have, controls just the southern part and the eastern part of the settlement. Furthermore, the Ukrainians published another video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian positions in the southern part of the settlement. On this video we see basically the final stronghold of the Russian forces in this area, the edge southern stronghold. This building, the Ukrainians discovered the Russian position there and attacking them with artillery fire. So this is the stronghold I'm talking about. Also, another important update regarding the situation in this area, and this update we got just this morning, yesterday in the evening, which also confirms about the changing of the Ukrainian force focus on the southern part, which also can be an evidence that the Russians left the north and the central part and currently try to hold the settlement in the southern outskirts of Robotyne. So let's follow the situation. Also, the Russian sources reported that there are still very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians try to develop their offensive operation in the eastern part of the settlement, and the Russians reported that just during the 14th of August, as a result of Ukrainian offensive operation in direction of that settlement, the Ukrainians lost around 200 soldiers killed, killed and wounded, 200 soldiers. So we see that the Ukrainians significantly increased the pressure. They tried to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and to force the Russians to step back. As I understand, the Ukrainians, the main purpose and the main thing that Ukrainians want to implement, they want to capture two settlements like Robotyne and Urozhaine at the same day, and to announce this as a very big victory, like one day, two settlements. So of course it will bring significant media victory for the Ukrainians, and after that the Ukrainians will get another logistic hub in Robotyne that they will be able to use for moving some equipment, warehouses, ammo depots, and of course infantry and troopers. And from this area the Ukrainians will be able to start development of their offensive operation in many directions, like in Kopany, Novopokrovka and Verba. Very difficult situation, so we'll follow this area as well. We haven't received almost nothing from Urozhaine. The Russians reported that Ukrainians are moving slowly to the south, that northern area is under complete Ukrainian control, the central is in the gray zone, and probably the Ukrainians yet haven't managed to enter the southern outskirts. Currently they're continuing their clearing operation. Now we're moving to very interesting area, to Donetsk front line. Yes, we know this area, we recognize this area about the battle of Novomikhailivka and Krasnogorovka, but today we are going to talk about another battle, the battle of Pervomayskaya. And the Russian sources published very interesting video today of a tank offensive operation in direction of the stronghold among the forest lines between Pervomayskaya, Nivolskaya and so on. On this video we see how the Russians sent an armored fist, attack fist, that included few tanks and few personal armored carriers. The Russians were moving along the gray zone that was checked by the Russians. There are no mines, as you can see. The Russians have bypassed some forest lines, some trees, and after that the Russians entered the combat line attack, and from that combat line attack the Russians were attacking in direction of a small stronghold. This one, they were Ukrainian soldiers, and the Russian sources reported that as a result of that attack the first tank was damaged. First the tank got on mine, and after that the tank was attacked by the Ukrainian anti-tank missile. But anyway, as a result of that operation, of that mission, according to the Russian sources, they managed to capture the stronghold and to develop the Russian bridgehead in this area. So basically, according to this tank battle and this video geolocated information, we understand that the Russians managed to develop their positions in the vicinity of Nivolsk and Pervomaysk, and basically as a result of that attack the Russians captured, this is the area, this is the stronghold. Basically the Russians have developed their bridgehead, something like this. Of course, very important operation and very important progress in the next developments, movements in direction of Nitailova, Pervomayskaya. Furthermore, during that operation we saw the heaviest artillery fire that the Russians met in the vicinity of that settlement. We see the artillery like explosions and so on. The Ukrainians were using the local mortar systems, that there were mortar positions that were located in Pervomaysk in the northern part. The Russians, of course, during that attack, at one side the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian stronghold with a tank. From another side the Russians were checking and tracking the positions in this area, local mobile mortar positions in this area. They managed to discover one, and after that the Russians launched artillery strike, and as a result of that strike another Ukrainian mortar position was destroyed. So that was a very interesting special operation of Russian forces, and as a result of that operation the Russians first managed to capture the Ukrainian stronghold in this area and to destroy probably few artillery and mortar positions of the Ukrainians in this area. What is the most important and the most interesting in this operation is that the Russian doctrine, the Russian tactic they use is completely differs from the Ukrainian one. And to tell the truth, this is the second successful operation from the Russian side that they managed to implement during the previous, let's call it 72 hours. The first one attack, almost the same, that has almost the same signs, almost the same things, was the operation in the vicinity of Klishchiivka. We remember when the Russians attacked the Ukrainian positions in Klishchiivka using just one tank and 2 personal armored carriers. And this is the same attack, almost the same attack in the vicinity of Pervomaiskaya. Just the Russians were using just one tank. They started movement, so somewhere in this area they were using just one tank, and with one tank and 2 personal armored carriers they managed to capture a small stronghold. So what does it mean? If you see, the Ukrainians use completely different doctrine. The Ukrainians, when they attack a single settlement, they basically use probably 20 light vehicles, maybe few hundreds of tanks, millions of infantry, and they're just trying to capture a small village among the fields. So this is the Ukrainian tactic, right? And these tactics of course have some benefits, because when you see such a hordes of soldiers, of course sometimes you think that it's better to step back and to run away, because it's very scary to fight with such a hordes of army. And from one side, the Ukrainians, we see that usage of that tactics haven't led the Ukrainians to significant success. They were fighting for Urozhaine and on Rabotino since the beginning of June, for around 3 months, and so different doctrine. And on the other side, we see the Russians use small tactical groups, not even tactical groups, small operational groups, 2 armored vehicles, 2 personal carriers, armored vehicles, personal carriers the same, and 1 tank, and probably a platoon of infantry. And this, with the help of such a small groups, they are able to capture this or that strongholds and to develop their bridgehead further and further. Very interesting tactics that the Russians start using, and we'll see whether the usage of these tactics will bring them success on the Donetsk front line. When talking about the Klishchiivka area, Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, after the Russians managed to capture and force the Ukrainians to step back from Klishchiivka, the Russians launched artillery bombings and shellings of the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of those settlements, trying to suppress them, to force them down, and of course not to allow them, to Ukrainians, to launch a counter-offensive operations, because the Russians need time to dig in deeper in Klishchiivka, to make clearing operations, to destroy and to find the traps in that area, and so on. And we got also very interesting update from the Andreevka, from the gray zone of Andreevka. The Ukrainians launched a small offensive operation in direction of that settlement. They brought some tanks or artillery system to the edge positions, which was discovered by the Russian forces, and as a result of artillery strike, that artillery system or armored vehicle or tank, even tank, was destroyed. On this video we see at least 3 armored vehicles concentrated in this area, and one of those armored vehicles was destroyed. Probably the rest of armored vehicles were destroyed as well. So basically on this video we see that the Ukrainians probably tried to accumulate some armored fist in this area, which they were planning to use to attack in direction of Andreevka, but that attack was repelled even at the beginning, at the base of the beginning of that attack. The Ukrainians published few videos on bombing and shellings of oil refinery, and this is a regular situation in this area, just artillery duels without any changes. We haven't received nothing from Kupiansk and Liman front line, and also I remind you that during the previous night the Russians made another massive missile attack, struck all over the entire Ukraine. The explosions took place in Liman, in Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and the missile strikes took place in Dnipro, in Zaporozhye area. There were a lot of videos of explosions and so on. Furthermore, there were at least a lot of explosions in the western part of Ukraine, in Lutsk. There were explosions in Lvov. This is the results of one of those one of the arrival of missile. And there was also there were explosions in Stara-Konstantinovka, in the air base of 7th Aviation Brigade. That Ukrainians, this brigade, I remind you, have the Su-24 aircrafts in this brigade that can attack the Russians using the Storm Shadow missiles. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.